Welcome, everybody, to Season 4 of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I am your host, Art Stapleton, and yes, it's Season 4. The summer, for all intents and purposes, is over, and as I shed a tear to come on, there is an excitement to be able to get this thing going again. So welcome, our 4th season. It's kind of amazing that we started on the tail end of the pandemic, and now we've gone through another coaching regime, and we're going to get right into it. Hard Knocks, training camp. I haven't done a show in a couple of weeks, really since the jersey reveal, I think. So it's been a while, but I wanted to jump in with my guests, and I want to have some fun this summer. I want to bring, some guys. I don't like the term content creators because, look, these guys are more than that. And, you got a bunch of different podcasts that are out there now with the Giants flooding the market. But one of my favorites, and these guys, we met in person for the first time last summer. And unfortunately, it's like the Beastie Boys. If you can't have all three, you're not going to turn down one. So for this show, we're going to bring in El Jefe. And, he's a man of many personalities. If you've caught his videos online and on their YouTube channel, we'll get to that. And he can tease all the stuff out of the New York Revival. But El Jefe, thanks for joining me.
Art, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. We've been talking for a while and texting a lot more lately too about everything, Giants and not Giants. So very excited to do this, and thank you for having me on.
So without a mention, got to mention your other compadres with Eli and Spiro, and you guys do a great job with your podcast, with all the content that you guys put up. I love seeing, a team kind of come together that way, and it's kind of funny. So let's start off there, just in terms of your fandom. Tell people a little bit about, who you are, how you came into this, and, what do you like most about what you guys have been able to do over at New York Revival?
I do this New York Revival with Eli and Spiro. Spiro's in Greece right now, what he calls his homeland.
Nice.
And Eli is working, but with three of us in schedules, like sometimes we just have to branch off and do these things. So we never want to turn anything down. So he's like, you go represent, go have fun, and we'll support. But we're having a great time with it. We met in this Giants community online, and these are, two of my best friends. I'll be friends with these guys the rest of my life. And we couldn't wait to branch off and start our own thing and put our own spin on it. And what you maybe gather is like, we try to have fun first, right? Because being a Giants fan has been challenging. So if we,
I've heard that.
So like, in case you haven't noticed, I'm trying to have fun with whatever their situation is. And that if that means, playing games on New York Revival and having guests on, and it's always about laughing and having a good time and sharing a drink maybe, and doing those things to like the fun parts of being a fan. Instead of breaking down X's and O's, we have very smart people in our community that do that stuff, but that's just not our thing. And we just like to have fun first and foremost. And we're looking forward to a really good season either way. And I don't like the term content creator either way, but there just isn't a better name for it yet, because that's what we're doing. But we're having a great time with it, and we're going to keep pushing the envelope and trying different things. That's for sure.
It's funny. The first time I even was turned on to New York Revival was your backyard videos that, you portray several fans. I don't even know. I mean, we all know, El Jefe. And if you haven't seen that, I urge you to check that out. But your videos, when did you first come up with the idea to put together a video about fans? And you're really poking fun at yourselves, but also you're poking fun at just the idea of this Giants fan and also the team, because what they've done the last 5 years, really 10 years, the happiness has been few and far between. But so how'd you come up with this, and when did you realize, this is something that I want to do?
So it was 2021, and that was Joe Judge's last year.
Yeah.
And we actually liked Joe Judge at that time, but I'm seeing all
before Joe Judge's heel turn in
Chicago. Boy. Yeah. Before it got real ugly. But I'm watching all these interactions on Twitter, and people are fighting, and you have people who are so passionate about what the Giants are doing in one direction, and the people who are watching the same thing, but see it from the exact opposite view. And I'm like, there's something there. And I like to mess around and edit videos in my spare time and stuff like that. Like I'll make birthday videos for my kids every year. Like any chance to get in iMovie and get my hands dirty and edit, I think is so fun. So I've always enjoyed and loved doing that stuff. But I just record. I'm like, let me just put a quick script together of a blue jersey Homer fan and a white jersey realist, negative, whatever you want to call them, fan, and have them interact and just basically pull the script right from Giants Twitter. And so I did that. And the first week, the editing is terrible. There's hardly any sense of humor in there at all because I didn't know what it would become. I didn't know even what I was capable of in terms of writing and doing that stuff. This was just for fun. I almost didn't even post it. But then I did, and it kind of took off. And then like an hour later, I remember I had a golf outing that day. And after like 3 or 4 holes, someone's like, dude, have you checked your Twitter? And I'm like, no, why? And they're like, you might want to do that. And I go on there and it like absolutely took off. And I've like DMs from Barstool, like, hey, can we share this? And I'm like, oh my, what the hell is happening? Like this. And looking back at it, it's bad. Like
you're just talking that one video.
That first video, the editing is sloppy. There's nothing really creative about it, but it was an honest back and forth with opposite ends of the Giants fans spectrum, and it took off from there. And then came up with this chef Jefe, this chef character who's just so extreme negative. Like the Giants don't do a single thing right. And then I just added a stoner character for comedic relief. So then you get those 4 are the base. And I have a friend that looks like Dable. So once in a while he comes in. He was originally security because he's a big boy. But then
did you force him to lose weight before he comes on? Guys like me who might be a little sensitive about our weight loss. You look at Dable. I mean, you can't play Dable the same way now. Now you got to go find, if you're in Hollywood, you got to go find another actor to play Dable. I know. You have to tell your friend, look, it's sink or swim here. Let's go.
Look, the role is his for life, right? I think he actually has lost weight anyway, but Dable it's like half the size of what he used to be. He looks great. But that's my friend Chuck, who does a great job as Dable. I had one of my friends portray Wink. It was another big. I have a lot of these big friends, and the Wink and Dable back and forth. It was like right after they broke up, so I just like reenacted what their arguments were like. And so that's what I mean. Even though the Giants, it might be a crap storm out there, but there's still a way to have fun with it and laugh at the situation and try to have fun with being a fan. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do.
You don't have to tell me I've gotten on the beat, in 2011, which was the highs of the highs, right? I mean, I covered the team as part of our coverage team for NorthJersey.com and the Record in 09 and 10, and really did both the Jets and the Giants. And, in 09 and 10, the Jets were the team that went to the AFC Championship game. And the Giants in 10 was the Tom Coughlin kiss my ass in Washington. It was after the Deshaun Jackson punt return. Oh. And then so 11 was coming off the lockout. So I'm getting on the beat, trying to help out our main beat guy that 11 season. Who would have expected the highest of the highs in that, since 07. And then, from 12 on, our guy, Jeff Roberts, was the 1-year beat writer. He came in, got the lockout, got the Super Bowl, and then said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. So I took over full time. And I remember him telling me at some point in the 12 season, I don't know if you remember, but they had the back-to-back in Atlanta and Baltimore that the season just fell apart. And it was shortly after, there were crazy things. I mean, Sandy was that season. Then, when all that stuff happened with the shooting in Connecticut and Newton, and Victor Cruz was involved going up there with the kids. And it was such an emotional season for the Giants and for everyone. And then they had those back-to-back games. But he called me and said, hey, I handed you a Super Bowl champion, and this is what you did. So, since then I've been on the beat, and, we've had 2 playoff games that I've covered. Well, actually 3, but try to forget the one that was in Philly the week after 2 years ago. But,
that game didn't exist.
That Green Bay one, I haven't talked about this in a while, but the Green Bay one, when everyone talks about is how Odell just dropped passes all over the place and punched a hole through the wall in Lambeau. Mm-hmm. But we had a terrible snowstorm hit the New York area, and all our flights were canceled to Milwaukee. So we ended up driving from New York to Milwaukee, and
Wow.
then pulled in at 7 o'clock in the morning in the courtyard in Milwaukee, and then ended up having to drive to Lambeau for that playoff game. So I will never forget the first playoff game post Super Bowl 46. So, the one other thing I wanted to ask you, and I thought this was very interesting the other night, you ended up hopping on X or Twitter and doing kind of your music stuff and taking, and I know, knowing you, I imagine that's, you were thinking that it was going to be, funny and, have some humor and be comedic, but you do have talent as a musician. I'm curious, what's your background? I know you've posted some videos where you've played in bands before. Where's that come from? How long have you been a musician? And, where's that stand right now? Is it just for fun, or is this something that you want to get back into?
Yeah, at this point, it's just for fun. I'm a very mediocre musician, and because when I see a really good one, I know I'm not there, so that's how I'm comfortable being mediocre. But like, I think towards the end of high school, I had a couple friends who played guitar, and so I just found it like really cool, and so just tried to learn. But it wasn't until college, when you had all this free time in between classes and stuff, that like, if I had 3 hours between classes, I'd play guitar for 2.5 of those hours, because I'd be by myself. It was just a great way to spend that time. And that was kind of as like my competitive sports life was like, fading out. And so that was like a new passion. And then, by the end of college, was in a band, just rhythm guitarist. And then after college, just started playing covers in bars and stuff like that. So wound up being in a band from like, my early 20s to probably my mid 30s. And even now, I have a buddy that me and him will just do acoustic duo shows. We'll set up in the corner of a bar, play covers for 4 hours, get to drink for free, get some cash at the end of it, and have a great time. So for me, like, there was a time where I was pursuing it, mostly like late 20s, early 30s, where like we were in a band, we were traveling a bit, we were doing a couple festivals, original music, had a couple albums and stuff like that. But then it just kind of naturally faded out, as most bands do. But now it's like I got a guitar right here. Like it's just always there.
Right.
Whenever
I see over your
it.
shoulder too. I would imagine those are collectibles more than anything else.
Well,
right?
that's just yeah, exactly. They're decoration now. Those are two basses, because I played bass in a project for a little while, which was a lot of fun. I would do that again. And I think there probably will be another band a little bit later in life, when our kids are older and everybody's got a little more time.
Yeah.
But for now, it's just I can do parody songs if I want. I can. And the other night, I invited a couple friends to come over, and no one was able to make it. I was just in the mood to play. So I'm like, let me just throw this tweet out, name a random song, and I'll play guitar to it. And it wound up like getting way too many suggestions than I could ever do. Half of them completely joking. Someone was like Barbie Girl. Then someone was like Free Bird. and someone said Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. I'm like, damn, like,
yeah,
I love that song so much. And like, that was towards the end of the night. I had a couple of drinks, and I probably shouldn't have even posted that one, because it's sloppy and it's really hard to play. But I just had a lot of fun with it, and it was cool, different ways to interact with Giants fans and my followers. And I think everyone knows that I'm kind of just trying to have a good time. I stay out of, as much as I can, the arguments and the ugly side of Twitter. I really try to just keep it light.
Except the Damn It Daniel.
Well, that kind of like toes the line a little bit, because I do Damn It Daniel. So I'm in my car and I'm making a video, and it's just me talking to Daniel Jones. And that was another one where I just recorded. Maybe the Yellow Lab may have been the first one where.
Oh my God, that was
the Giants media team asked Daniel Jones what kind of dog he would be, and he said, "Oh, I don't know, a lab." And so I'm like, that's the most Daniel Jones answer. And I started going off a rant with my friend. He was like, "You should just record this." And then I think on my way home from hanging out with him, I just hit record, and it was like one take, and I just went through it, didn't have anything written. And then like that got a good response. I'm like, okay, that's another thing I can do here and there. So now it's like my pep talk to Daniel Jones before the game.
Their social media team put out the dog video the other day.
That's what resurfaced it.
Yeah,
they didn't ask Daniel again though.
I tell you what, a couple of the guys named some dogs. I'm like, did they just make that up? Like some of the dogs that they knew about, it was almost like, I've never heard of that dog. Yeah. Like, how did you guys come up with this stuff?
It is a tough question, because like a lot of guys would like to say they're a pit bull, but the reality is that you're not. There's very few pit bulls out there. Right. So it's kind of hard to find a breed that's honest, but not too over the top.
And all of those social media stuff, if you don't realize, a little behind the curtain kind of thing, they do that when the guys are coming off the practice field most of the time. And they're usually stationed either on the practice field. All those random questions, they have someone holding a stand with
I
the question
figured,
on a piece of
yeah.
paper. But then also, it's after practice, especially when you're going to see them in training camp. Like the last thing these guys, not only do they have to go into the media sessions with us, now they're being asked questions, what's your favorite food? It's like, they're like, oh, come on,
That's gotta be tough because they're physically exhausted at that point. The cameras
exactly.
are always on them. But then, like, once in a while, you get, like, cool interactions between the players. Like
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Wandale seems to be a good time. I love the wide receiver group seeming like there seems to be good camaraderie there this year.
Yeah.
But you see them interact with each other, and that's cooler to me than, like, their actual answers to the questions.
I
To see
agree
it.
with you. And I mentioned this from the spring. There was a video, it was only really a couple weeks into the OTAs, and Malik Neighbors was with all the defensive players, and they were interacting and they were joking. I think it was about touchdown dances or something like that. And you
Mhm.
could see the way Neighbors was interacting with, and it wasn't just, guys at the bottom of the roster on defensive players. There were guys that have been around for a little bit, and to see Neighbors, and this is my transition to starting to talk a little football, but just the idea, Malik Neighbors, this guy knows he's an alpha, he's ready to be an alpha, and the guys around him in that locker room know he's an alpha. And I've heard this since I started covering the NFL. The locker room knows. The locker room knows if you're faking it. The locker room knows if you're too arrogant, if you can't match it on the field. They know Neighbors is a real deal. And I'm interested to see from your perspective, since you guys weren't there in the spring. I mean, you
Yeah.
saw the random videos that we were able to put out, but I know you're going to be heading to camp this week at some point. And I didn't mention in the beginning, today's report day. So really all report day is they come in, they do their physicals, they do a conditioning test to make sure all the guys are ready to go. Then they make the determination as to if anybody's going to start on the PUP list or they'll be ready to go to practice, and then first practice is Wednesday morning. But my question to you is, do you temper your enthusiasm for Malik Neighbors, or do you think because of where the team is, because of what you dealt with last year, because of all the stuff with Saquon about the idea of, the Giants have gotten rid of their best player, quote unquote, which, we can talk about that. But what is your feeling on Malik Neighbors, and how excited are you to see him go out there, wear a number that he won't be wearing in September, and kind of put on a little bit of a show?
I think it's exciting. By the way, I plan on being there tomorrow, weather
Okay.
pending. So
Yeah.
Wednesday, first day, I hope to be there. But I think he raises the level, just the energy level and the talent level of the whole group, because now you have that true alpha, and it makes Wandale look more dangerous in the middle.
Yeah.
You got Slayton or Hyatt on the other side. I think they'll both get playing time. But it's going to be like now you have a lot of speed in that wide receiver group. So I think this is without a doubt the best group that the Giants and Daniel Jones have had to work with in recent memory. You lose Saquon, but you're hoping that the improved line, because there was a time when we had Saquon and Odell and a two-time Super Bowl champ at quarterback, and it still wasn't enough. So it's proof that you need a team, and I think it starts and ends with the O-line. I think that's just the most important factor of how this season will go, because it has the ability to sink a season very quickly, and I'm hoping that group we needed some better injury luck for sure, but they added some pieces. Guys need to play better, but I mean, if they can gel, that opens up the receiving game. Then Neighbors can get going. It's going to be interesting because he's such an alpha, and even Dable asked him in the interview, like, how do you handle if you're
Right.
not getting the ball a lot, if the times get tough? And it's clear he's not going to handle it well.
Right.
I mean, he might surprise some people at first, but there's going to be a point where the guy wants to win and he wants the ball. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. Daniel Jones is going to have to feed him well, right? Like it's got to be good looks and everything like that. Yeah. So, but he's a game wrecker. He's that Odell factor of he can win a game for you. He can take a slant to the house. He can make those wow plays. And that's what we've been missing. We need those wow plays. That's how teams win game. It comes down to a couple plays sometimes. And he's a guy that can make that play, that can get the W.
It's funny, everybody, we've been talking about Odell, for years, even before he had, a situation where, you're going to bring in a guy and compare him to Odell, the LSU connection. You've got the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Odell here with the Giants. The thing about Odell is, Odell went about it the wrong way, but what he said and how he felt is very similar to what Dable talked to neighbors at the combine about. And what I thought was interesting, and that, we could talk Hard Knocks too a little bit, because I think people have kind of missed the boat a little bit on what Hard Knocks was representing, or at least what the Giants wanted to represent. I think that neighbors stuff was very interesting, because I thought the way they were able to transition from the scouting meetings of the scouts that went on campus and dug in, this was before any campus visits, dug in on these prospects. And basically you had the scout tell front office and the coaching staff, look, when you get him in a room, you need to talk about this, because we need to know if he understands what that means. You can't show your quarterback up. You want the ball. We know you're not going to be happy if you don't get the ball. You're not going to be happy with losing. So how will you handle that? And I thought the transition showing that video and then going to the combine interview, like you mentioned, the interaction between Dable and Neighbors. And I thought what was great about Neighbors is that he didn't hide it.
Yeah.
He basically said, yeah, I don't like it. I don't, if you don't like me or you can't help me, then don't pick me. Yeah. And that's essentially how I took it. And Dable, the funny part is now hearing somebody else talking about controlling their emotions, and Dable kind of hinted at it and said, yeah, I know what that's like, and then you see Shane's, laugh, kind of like poking him, like, good job.
Yeah. He's like, oh, really? You're working on controlling your emotions. Interesting.
Exactly. So I thought, I want to talk, because I haven't talked to anybody about Hard Knocks. I mean, I've texted with people. I think I even texted with you. We've gotten, HBO offers up screeners, not the Giants. The Giants have not leaked anything. They haven't put anything, at least not that I've seen, in terms of what the episodes are. HBO and Max sent out an email before the entire series started and said, if you'd like a screener, which is what they would do for Game of Thrones or back in the day, Sopranos, you sign up to be a screener. They validate you, and they validate you on one account, one screen. They actually can test which screen you're on. Wow. And they send you a screener. Now, the first 2 weeks we were spoiled because they sent episodes 1 and 2. So I was able to watch them back to back. So I was ahead of the game. So I was just bursting with people. I just wanted to, because I thought the second episode at the Combine was the best of the series so far.
Agreed. Yep.
I haven't been blown away by the Saquon stuff because it's stuff that I thought I knew already. But what have you liked about Hard Knocks as a fan? This is your team, and for all the debate online from Giants fans back and forth about what is going on, you've actually seen a version now of what your team looks like. My thought was the Giants agreed to do this because they wanted to show their fans who are willing to have an open mind that they're not a laughing stock behind the scenes. Now, it's been perceived a little bit differently nationally with the way they've handled things. As a fan, as someone who is immersed in this stuff, how have you taken the entire series to this point? With tonight is episode 4, which is going to lead up right to the draft. What's your feeling? What's your take? What do you talk about with your Giants fans, friends, and where are you at with everything Hard Knocks related?
In a way, it's been awesome, first of all, seeing, behind the scenes stuff. And I think there's been ammunition for both sides of the fan base too. Because you can, just like watching a game, you can take what you want from it. Was Daniel Jones bad because he's bad, or is he bad because the O-line is not capable? And like, you could look at it 2 different ways, and that's the Giants fan base right there. But seeing Hard Knocks it confirmed that I always thought like Dable is a great offensive mind, and I would love to see him have full control of the offense with play calling. And it seems like we're going to get that this year. But you saw him in those combine interviews. Like, I agree with you. That second episode I thought was the best one too. Seeing Dable like in his element, talking offense, like Shane didn't even know what he was saying. and just putting these quarterbacks on the spot was fascinating, just to see how they would respond. And that's the point of it. You're putting them in tough situations to see how they respond. Not that they're expected to know it all perfectly. So I thought that was really cool. Shane, coming into Hard Knocks, I was still trying to figure out if Shane is good, right? And I'm still trying to figure that out, because there are moments where I like the way he's doing things. I liked that he didn't break the bank for Saquon, because we've had Saquon and we've just been losing and losing for the majority of his time here. So I don't think that was a move the Giants needed to make with the state of the roster. But it also confirmed that, Mara is making his feelings known, as he's allowed to do as the owner.
Right.
But there are people who are concerned about that, because, as a young and newer GM, having that owner and your boss constantly letting his feelings be known, it could sway. It makes for tough, and you could feel the tension in the room. I added that in one of the skits. I said, I almost had to piss myself just watching from the couch, because it's so uncomfortable when they're in a room together. So that didn't necessarily instill confidence. You don't get the sense that they're lockstep on the same page. This is what we need to do. Go get it. It seems a little bit of push and pull as they maneuver the situations. And Dable just seems locked in. And I think it hasn't been crystal clear totally how Dable feels, but you're trying to read the room, read body language. And that's the stuff that we're getting access to that we never have before, which is cool.
Yeah. The sense I get with Dable is the idea of, number one, I mean, he has no insight into this. He does not want to be on Hard Knocks. He feels as though, he's not Belichick, but he's from that school of thought. The idea of any bit of information that I give out, teams could use to their advantage. Why? Because they have guys who are scouring the internet, trying to gain advantages of what teams put out there, what they don't put out there, in terms of clips from practices or what a coach may say. So that's where Dable's at. And I think how he said it at the Legends night, the idea of, he would walk into Shane's office with the phone playing music, the idea of, if you guys really want to use this, you're going to have to pay up, because you're going to have to pay for the rights to the song. And they did that last episode, paying for the rights to Beyonce's new song. And then brilliantly, I thought, Max turned that into an entire episode, building free agency around Texas Hold'em and poker and the way they did that. So I thought it was almost like point counterpoint. You guys want to play music? Okay, if we're going to pay it, we're going to basically, get this information and use it to our advantage. So I thought that was really cool. The couple of lines that I know fans have gotten really upset about, the idea that Dable comes off as, very simplistic. The idea when he was hiring Bowen and he mentioned, the defensive rankings, and that was it. And the idea that it was asking how many sacks Burns had last week when they talked about the trade for Burns. I could tell you, they probably have had meetings upon meetings after that, talking about the in-depth of what the guys will bring to the table. And I think at that point, it's almost like, Dable, are you going to say something? So he brings the least amount of information that's going to draw eyeballs to it. It may have the opposite reaction, and that, boy, this guy doesn't know anything about defense. He's, especially in the analytics world, he's talking about, defensive rankings and a guy's sacks, where, most defensive coaches nowadays only talk pressures, don't really talk sacks and, get off rate and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting. Do you feel better about Dable as a head coach because of what you saw in the combine meetings?
Yes. I definitely think he is the guy that I hope is able to weather the current storm that we're in and stay and be, help get his chance to fully see his offense come to fruition. I would really love to see that. I think he is that guy. And I liked a lot of the meetings, the behind the scenes stuff has been really cool. I think tonight we'll be able to see in episode 4, because the teaser was Shane saying, have you seen enough in Jaden Daniels? And Dable, as confident as others, said, I would trade up for him like that. So I can't wait to see how that conversation went, because you see also Mara saying, I'll have palpitations if this trade. So there was clearly a conversation happening there. and it played out the way it did. But like that's the stuff that we can't wait to see as fans. And like I've loved all of that, but like Dable, I'm 100% in on still.
Since I'm on the Mara payroll, which is what everybody's accusing me of,
we broke that news on New York Revival, I think.
Yeah. The last check hasn't come through yet, so we'll see if I'm going to turn on him. But Mara has history that none of us can even anticipate or know about this franchise. And he told the story back in the owners' meetings back when we were down in Florida. The idea of back in 2004 when they were deciding on whether or not to trade up, and they had Kerry Collins here who led this. It's so different than Daniel because Kerry Collins led this team to a Super Bowl, and he recalled Wellington Mara did not want to get rid of Kerry Collins. And as a fan base, there was a little bit of that when the Giants talked about having to get rid of Eli, and that's still the hate with Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese from a segment of the fan base is the way they got rid of Eli. And John talked about how back in 2004, he had to convince Wellington Mara to really let the GM at the time, which was Ernie Accorsi, move forward from Kerry Collins. And that meant getting rid of a quarterback that he loved that had gotten them to a Super Bowl. And, I think there's some of that with Mara now. He even admitted it and said, they love Daniel. They love why they picked Daniel. They love Daniel Jones in the building of who he is away from the field. But I do believe that, this team sees the limitations of Daniel Jones. They saw the highs of the high in 2022, but unfortunately, I think that game in Minnesota in the playoffs, sometimes it shows your ceiling. And if that's the ceiling and the floor is what we saw last week, there has to be a fear that you're going to be closer to the floor. But with John Mara, look, we also have to appreciate where Hard Knocks is coming from. They're trying to mix all this stuff together. John Mara is not sitting in his office, and I'll give you a little insight. His office is upstairs on the same floor as Joe Shane. So it's not like he's in this ivory tower and he's going to come down and, walk into Joe Shane's office and go, I'm going to lose sleep if we lose Saquon. He's our most popular player, and then shut the door and leave. These guys are together at practice. You'll see Mara out on the field at training camp. I mean, they're always talking after practice. So it's the way it's edited, I think, kind of lends to that whole idea of how, the boss comes into the office, slams the door, everyone sits up straight, gives their opinions. And then when the boss leaves and the door shuts, it's almost like, now we can talk about really what we think about these players. I really don't get the sense, even though that's the way it looks on Hard Knocks. I think that's kind of, and I understand why fans would fear that. But look, we heard, and I think the Giants in a backdoor kind of way showed what they did with John Mara saying what he said, because they wanted to show that Shane was the one making the call. So that's ultimately what happened, right? I mean, we're so obsessed with what John Mara said about Saquon, and then it's the Tim McDonald comment in the first episode, about what's our identity offensively. That is a fair question. I'm sorry. You could say, it's John Mara's nephew. It's the Mara's family wanting to, show influence. But the reality is, what are you going to do offensively if you don't have Saquon? He may like the answer. He may know the answer, because more than likely he talked to Joe Shane about what do we do if Saquon goes. So Joe Shane has given him that answer off camera. But the reality is, the edit showed you that with all of John Mara's fears and everything that he expressed, they still let Saquon Barkley walk without even offering him a contract and trying to match. So that's kind of where I feel. Do you see some of that, or do you still kind of hang up on that?
Thank you for bringing that up, because I am shocked that the Giants allowed the final edit to show some of these things, because you're seeing Mara, it's not like he's telling Joe Shane what to do. Right. But why would he constantly share his feelings if he didn't want to influence the outcome? So he's in there and he's saying these things, and at the end of the day, he's the owner. No one can tell him not to do that. Right. But you just hope, I don't think there's a ton of confidence that Mara knows best. I'll just say it like that. Right. Because he is loyal and he's a good guy and he's a nice guy. which I think comes through. Even when he's trying to get his point across, he's saying it with a smile, or he's saying, I'll be upset. He's not being an ass about it. He's just letting his feelings be known. But
Right.
the Giants are allowing that to be shown. And they're even allowing Joe Shane and his weird finger point. Like I can't that would have been the first thing cut out if I was in that room. But we can't say that. Look how uncomfortable that is. So like I was shocked that made it in. But even them showing the conversations about trading up for a quarterback, that's the stuff that we fully expected to be edited out.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. So because like you got Daniel Jones is the quarterback. Daniel Jones is obviously watching this. He's seeing his head coach say, yes, I would trade up for that quarterback. So I can't believe they let that out there. What does that do for their dynamic and their relationship? So they've shown more than I expected, which is why, I mean, Hard Knocks always does a great job. I watch any team that they put on there, but I can't believe how much access we're getting. And I think that's been the best part.
Yeah, and I think, one other thing, the idea that the Giants are editing it to show you what they show. I mean, Max is editing. The Giants are saying what can't be allowed.
Yes or no, pretty much.
And that's but that's conversations that may lead to, like, go back to that whole competitive advantage. And I don't buy it, but they really buy it. Like I really don't think that the Vikings are going to gain an advantage over the Giants by things that they may say in Hard Knocks that happened in February. But the reality is that it's not what people like. It's not a scripted reality show. Now, they may script scenes for just the visual. And I can tell you, I mentioned this on X last night, the idea that when we were at the mini camp, John Mara's office has a balcony, and it overlooks the practice fields. When you're in the stands tomorrow, weather permitting, if you look at the building, the back of the building where the patio is, and you have the NY on the wall, that is John Mara's office, essentially. And during the mini camp, I saw that they had Joe Shane out on that balcony. My guess is that will be the closing shot. At least if I were editing the package, that would be the closing shot of, here's the general manager. The entire series has been on him, and you shoot him from behind looking at the practice fields. And here's the team coming together, and then you get Liev Schreiber saying something effective, the real work begins in, August or something like that. And then that's how the show will end next Tuesday night. That's my prediction. But I think they stage scenes, but they don't stage dialogue. And I think that's kind of where it's a little misconception that, the idea of, they're handing a script, or, hey, we didn't get this, so can you talk about this? I don't know if that's necessarily happening the way people think it might be. So I think it adds a little bit of, that it's more genuine, that it's authenticity to it. And I think, they knew that the cameras were there. So Joe Shane coming into his office, I don't think Joe Shane said, you know what, this morning I'm going to come in, I'm going to throw my feet on my desk, and I'm going to pretend like I'm all stressed out, like the scene that opened the last episode. Like, that's Saturday morning of free agency. Like, what do you think that
he's about to be awake for 36 hours straight. Like, that's
right.
Yeah.
And then they talked, what they didn't show, which I was upset they didn't show, is that supposedly, and I got this from people inside, and it's one of the things I want to ask Shane when we have their joint press conference tomorrow, Dable and Shane, is that the Burns trade, so much attention was put with Dan Morgan and Joe Shane, and rightfully so. It's, it's the unique part. But there was also the negotiating factor that had to happen before they really got to Morgan and Shane and said, okay, what's our draft compensation? What's our trade compensation? And Kevin Abrams was supposedly up until 3 a.m. with Brian Burns' agent on the phone, going back and forth, negotiating that contract that Burns ultimately agreed to take if the Giants were able to pull a trade off. So, and the fact that Shane, lays out the parameters, but then lets Kevin Abrams and Ed Triggs, who was another figure last week that kind of stepped forward, except for his little, joke about, the the motorboat, which was kind of silly,
Yeah.
and pointing to the lock on the door. But these are things that these guys are letting their personalities go. You may not always laugh, but that's what I thought was also an interesting part of it, is what they're not showing, and the idea that you don't think of the negotiating going until 3:00 in the morning. And whenever we think of negotiating, you think it's Joe Shane and the agent or the player talking about it. And the fact that he has people around him that he can trust, I can tell you with 100% certainty, Dave Gettleman's regime was all about Dave Gettleman. Surprise, I know.
Yeah.
But Dave Gettleman didn't trust anybody around him, and because he thought he was the one who needed to make the call. And I think that the best thing about Joe Shane is that he has put these people in place. Now, you can agree with the people or not, but the Chris Rossetti, the Brandon Brown.
Yeah, those two specifically have come off very well, I think, in the show. Clearly smart guys. I think like Giants fans on both sides of the fence, everyone is looking at those two like, okay, these are some smart minds in the building. Let's hear from them more. I would be fascinated to know like how Brandon Brown, like what he maybe would be doing differently in these situations, because you could tell sometimes he holds back. Joe Shane is the boss. He's letting his feelings be known, but it seems like Brandon Brown is holding back. Could be just because of the cameras, but it seems like he's got more to say, that he's just kind of treading lightly sometimes.
And it's what I find really cool is that, the relationship between Joe Shane and Brandon Brown, they didn't work together before they got here, and Brandon Brown left a pretty good operation with Howie Roseman down in Philly to come here to be Joe Shane's right-hand man. And even with Joe Shane bringing Ryan Cowden in, as an advisor to the GM when Cowden kind of, when everything fell apart down in Tennessee and they didn't give him the GM job. Joe Shane and Ryan Cowden are very close. So, but you haven't seen Cowden have any kind of presence on Hard Knocks at all. But I can tell you, he's a valued voice for Joe Shane, but so is Brandon Brown. And I think, that is kind of cool. And I think that's what the Giants wanted to show. Like, they really wanted to show that, to put it bluntly, Shane has his shit together. Like, you may not agree with the way he's doing things, but he has a staff together that he believes in. There's some good people here. You got to hear from some of the scouts back in, the second episode of the Combine. I think they feel as though they're, the perception was that they have a bunch of bumbling idiots walking around that building. And some people may still feel that way. But ultimately, you're only as good as what your talent on the field turns out to be. And that's where they will be ultimately judged. How are these players? How do they perform? So that's kind of the transition for me. For you, we're going into training camp. Give me the, El Jefe, this is what I want to see over the next couple of weeks. Maybe this is what I'm most concerned about. And why is it the offensive line?
I would say the most, like, I would file the offensive line under concerning, but I would say maybe like the running back group is one of the most interesting things to see shake out. Obviously, Singletary is going to be there, but like, what happens after that? And like, can you actually get a committee out there that's dangerous and playmakers, get them in the right positions, right? Because you've got Tracy, you got Brightwell, and you got Gray. And
don't forget, you missed him in the spring. Brightwell's gone.
Oh, Brightwell's gone. That's it. Oh, that's right. I put out a whole. I forgot I put out a thing about that.
Did you? What about Brightwell getting?
Well, yeah, because like I joke every year. It's like, wow, like thank God, like what a pickup that was. And it's just kind of just fuels the fire of frustration for Giants fans because there's so much talent in the running back pool, and every single year you see these mid to late round running backs have an impact, and it's like we just somehow miss on all of them. We don't know what to do with them. Either way, I think we'll get a chance this year because Saquon's gone. So Singletary is going to be the lead back, but it's going to be interesting to see like who's going to be maybe that third down pass catching back. Can you trust them in pass protection? How does that shake out? And can we ignite one of these guys to be a threat? And like, that's what I'm hoping for. At least get a 1-2 punch. If you can get a full committee, great. Keep them all fresh. But that's going to be interesting to me. But like I think what would have me most encouraged, because I got egg in my face after last season. I was predicting 11-6. I was all in. I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I was pouring gas on the Darren Waller fire, saying this guy's unstoppable, which in my defense, he was in camp. He was. He looked like a man amongst boys at camp. I went 2 or 3 times last year. He looked fast. He was catching everything. He looked gigantic. And so how do you not get excited about that? You're coming off a playoff season. You just
100%.
added a cool weapon. So obviously it didn't work out. But I would love to see the offensive line have their positions like locked down. And I think that's one thing that's so concerning is should Evan Neal not be able to perform, then it starts this revolving door. You got a guard, playing tackle where he's more comfortable at guard. And then it starts the shuffling. And then you're like one more injury away from this being a disaster again. And like that will sink the season. Daniel Jones won't be comfortable. It won't look good. More injury risk. Everything bad happens when that offensive line starts to crumble a little bit. So I would love to see them lock down their spots, get these guys as many reps as possible, like the 5, and go from there. But like the revolving door just doesn't seem to work for us.
Yeah, and I think one player who hasn't gotten a lot of attention negatively, and that's because he was a rookie and he was banged up. But John Michael Schmitz at center needs to play better this year. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Now, what could you attribute his struggles last year to A, being a rookie and having to run this offense, and B, being having rotating guards around him, until Justin Pugh really came at left guard, there really wasn't that veteran presence. I mean, Glowinski was, benched and came back and all this stuff, and Bredesen and who knows, all these guys. I don't know how much anybody really helped John Michael Schmitz at center. So to me, everyone's talking about Evan Neal. John Michael Schmitz, if Neal is 1A concern, John Michael Schmitz has to be 1B. If not 1B, then put him at second. We got to see when he comes out in the regular season that he's a better player than what he was last year. And I think he will be, but I do think that there are things that happened last year at the center position that, really were glossed over because, look, you walk into a burning building and you come out and you're trying to save the couch, but then, you look over and there's, a really cool lamp. Well, the lamp was, Schmitz, but, you're like, oh, well, look, our couch is burning and it's the tackle we took 7th overall, So I think, yes, that'll be interesting. I think here's a question I have for you as a fan.
Sure.
Okay. And it's my last thing on Evan Neal. If Evan Neal doesn't make those comments last year about flipping burgers and express his frustration, do you think the venom spewed his way from Giants fans would be the same, or do you think it's only made it that much more he's public enemy number one?
Well, it definitely didn't help his case. I mean, how much easier is it to turn on a guy who just pretty much stuck his middle finger up at the fans directly? Like, right. Dude, that is not the way to get especially this fan base, which is so hard to get everyone on your side. Like Dexter Lawrence has managed to do it. There's nobody that hates Dexter Lawrence. The guy plays well. He's a great personality, does all the right things.
I'm accused of hating Dexter Lawrence because I had the tweet that he didn't talk to the media after the Dallas game. So,
well, you hate him, obviously.
Yeah,
besides you, everyone else likes him. But where were we going before this?
You were talking about Evan Neal and the flipping burgers comment.
Yeah, like we had Eric Flowers. We had these guys who struggled really bad, and trust me, the hate would still be there. The criticism would still be there if you're not playing well. But when you say stuff like that towards fans, and credit to Justin Pugh for being like kind of that I think the first week he was here, it's kind of being that veteran voice saying, hey, like he's young. He didn't trust me. He didn't mean that. And he was trying to he was being that good voice, like that veteran leadership. But like you mentioned JMS, and yes, Evan Neal will still get criticism, but it's fuel on the fire when you say stuff like that. Cause then you don't have a leg to stand on at that point. Fans aren't going to stick up for you when you already made that kind of comment back to him. And as a person who wears the chef apron, I was highly offended, as you can imagine.
You know what? I never thought about this. Maybe it was a conspiracy. Maybe somebody sent Evan Neal a video of Jefe.
Do you think any of them see the videos at all?
I think some guys do. So I could tell you some players Google their names. Some players search on Twitter for their names. Some guys don't even know Twitter or X exists. I mean, they have people who run their accounts that, sometimes you see guys post things and they, and then you have Daniel Jones only uses his for marketing or
that's for the best. Daniel Jones does not need to be on Twitter.
Yeah. I don't think Daniel Jones is putting out, hashtag ad, on Instagram. It's somebody they've got guys or girls running their social media. But would be kind of funny. Hey, look, Jefe is the one person who's flipping burgers. Maybe when he made a comment, maybe Evan Neal was upset about it.
And Jefe is not one to forgive quickly. So if you make that kind of comment, you're
Yeah.
going to be on his SHIT list for a long time.
Yeah, that's pretty good. The one thing I wanted to ask you, what happened with the grill? You were able to resurrect the grill? Like
the only thing dumber than making a sketch about a grill dying is that you were able to fix it days later. So like I didn't fully give up on it, like, but it did crap out. Like my brain just goes to like, how do I use this for material? So I wrote a whole sketch around, the funeral for a grill. And Jefe was so attached to his grill. It's like the first time you saw a chef maybe like get emotional or a little more serious. I had bagpipes playing in the background. It was a whole production.
Yeah.
But then a couple days later, I just took the whole thing apart because I'm like, I don't really want to spend $1,000 on a new grill.
Right.
So like I just took cleaned it like I've never cleaned it before. And I think ultimately the gas lines were like clogged a little bit. And through shaking it all out, I was able to get it lit up again. I'm like, okay, do I make another video about resurrecting it or just tell everyone I'm an idiot for wasting their time on a grill sketch? But that's the kind of stuff that I'm not afraid to throw at the wall at this point. If I have an idea, then at that point, like it's a sickness. I need to make it and see it come to fruition and then throw it at the wall. And it's up to people if it's good or not. But like I'm happy if I'm proud of it. And I think if you laughed once in it, then it was worth the 90-second sketch, I think.
Because it's just about the sketch, and I know we keep coming back to that, and I always find it funny. What do you think the reaction would? Do you think people would actually look at you and say, who the hell is that guy? Or come up to you and say, Jefe, if you actually showed up at camp with the hat and the apron on?
I think week 1, I'm going to go tailgate as Jefe. I could do it tomorrow. I mean, but like, I think, I probably get more, for some reason, people like that character the best.
Right.
And he is the most miserable, negative fan. But I think it's just like that tension that comes with it that you like about him. But I'm not afraid to do that. I'm clearly not afraid of embarrassing myself. So I think that's good. At some Giants event, I will go full Jefe. That's a promise.
All right, we hit the running back. We talked offensive line a little bit. The defense. I mean, we're all excited to see. How could you not be? Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau together with Bobby Okereke. You're not going to see that in training camp. I mean, you're not going to see that in the preseason. That's going to come down to one. So I'll withhold the excitement, enthusiasm about that. You mentioned the running backs. I think Tracy, I would not be so down on Eric Gray. I know some fans are down on Eric Gray because of how he performed really in an impossible situation, having to, try to get on the field and justify him being on the roster, on the game day roster, by being, kickoff return and, dabbling in punts. And I think the fans kind of remember him and just look at him as a bust there. I think Gray might factor into this as well in that backfield. And, I don't want to go as far as to say, Earth, Wind, and Fire, but I do think that there will be a package of plays for either Gray or Tracy in the passing game that may, if the Giants get to it, may allow one of those two guys to kind of take a step up and where people are now looking at them and saying, you know what, we need to get him the ball more. And I'm waiting for that. That's going to be the idea of Singletary is going to get, 15 carries and, it's all going to be about the touches that, Tracy and if not Tracy, Gray are not getting week to week.
Yeah, and the key to that is sustaining drives so that these guys get a chance to show what they can do, right? If you give him one pass out of the backfield per game, if that's a busted play, then you don't think he's a good player, and it's just not true. Like it needs to sustain drives so these guys get chances, and then if you're doing enough of that, Singletary can rest for an entire drive, and you let one of these backs really get going. Because I think we've talked to Tiki Barber on Revival, and one of the things he says is like, getting in a rhythm of a game is so important for a running back. And it's so hard to get there if you're just doing special teams and you get that one chance on third down. So if you convert that to a first down, that's your ticket to getting another look. And if it's a busted play, they're unlikely to be eager to go back to you. So getting these guys warm and warmed up in the game and confident is so huge, and it's going to come from the O-line sustaining drives, and then take that deep shot when it's there.
Props for the Tiki Barber name drop and
Oops, did I name drop? Sorry.
I also love the Twitter overture, to Kay Adams and when she's going to come to Giants camp and be on there. She was on your show. That was very impressive.
She was on my very short list of like, I'm going to freak out if we get this person on the show. Victor Cruz is probably my number one. He was my favorite Giant. And I want to tell him a story about how he influenced my decision to marry the woman I married. And he has no idea.
Yeah. Well, I have to say Victor Cruz has watched All In once in a while. I go back. I don't know if you know. I covered Cruz when he was in high school.
Nice.
So I've known Victor since he was 15 years old.
How cool for you to see that. Oh, and then you started covering the Giants in 11.
And
so
that
you
was
saw
his
this.
year.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I knew him in 10 when he had the game in the preseason, and I had talked to him in the locker room. Nobody wanted to talk to Victor Cruz. Week 2 because he was on the roster, but he wasn't doing anything because he was hurt. So it was the Cruz career arc is something that I've kind of lived out with him. So
you had a front row seat for that.
I don't want to take your story, but come on, you can't drop that story. How did Victor Cruz factor into you marrying your wife?
So my wife is Spanish, right? And she knew Victor Cruz is my favorite player. So throughout that season, she would see me doing the salsa, acting like an idiot anytime he scored, stuff like that. And my dad, named Artie, by the way,
nice.
would always host a Super Bowl party. And so I was dating her for about a year or so, getting serious, no marriage aspirations quite yet, still in my 20s. And Victor Cruz scores that touchdown in the Super Bowl. And now there's, 45 people kind of in the same area in this house. And I was at the back end of the room. She was closer to the TV. And when Victor Cruz scored, she gets up in front of the TV, and she knows like most of the people there, but we're still just dating. It's not like she knew these people forever. She gets up in front of the TV and starts doing a salsa. And I was just like going celebrating like this. And my friends were like, "You're marrying her." And I was like, I think that's clear. I think that's clear at this point. Like you don't move away from that. Like it was just such an awesome moment of worlds colliding of, okay, just confirmed I'm going to marry this girl. And my team is kicking ass in the Super Bowl. So it's just like an awesome moment. And to get the buy-in from your friends that you need to marry that girl is also hard to get. So it all happened. It all happened at the same time. And
all right. Well, the fact that we share the same bond. My father's name is also Artie, so that's number one. And then obviously Arthur is my name. But
my grandfather too, which I got Big Art on my arm. That's what that says. I don't know if you could tell.
That's for your grandfather.
I was super close with my grandfather. And
I was given bad information. Spiro and Eli told me that was for me.
I actually got this just for this podcast. I want to show you that I am all in, and I got the Big Art right on the arm there. I'm dedicated. I'm not going to half-ass this interview. Okay.
That is great. So how did you not become another generation of Art or Artie?
Good question. It is my middle name, so they did throw it in there. But I guess I was almost AJ Arthur Jr. Yeah. But I guess I would have been Arthur the Third. So I don't know how that would work. But anyway, they for some reason went with Jeff. So I'll take it.
But you and I, boy, this is like going down a road because if we had, I have a daughter, my wife and I have a daughter, and she's now 4th generation for her name is Marianne. Believe it or not, on my wife's side. If we ever had a son, it was going to be Arthur John, and it was going to be AJ. So it's kind of funny.
My son is Ryan. Yeah, and my son is Ryan. His middle name is John. That was my grandfather on my mom's side. So there's all sorts of connections.
That's my grandfather on my mom's side is John as well. So we're going to meet. You know what? Maybe we just are the same person.
That's it.
It's just I can play you in a video, and we'll do that.
You can join a sketch. Just give me an hour heads up, and I'll write something for you. If you're ever around the Jersey Shore, let's do it.
We'll do it. But listen, we've gone well over what I'm sure you anticipated coming on.
This is way better than work, so I'll do this anytime you want.
I hear you. So why don't you tell everybody where they can get the stuff from the New
Sure.
York Revival, and
Yeah.
when are you guys airing your next pod, and go from there.
So definitely follow at New York Revival on Twitter. You can find us. Our link tree is there, so you can find us on whatever platform you like. But our YouTube has been doing nice. We got special guests lined up for the season. Going to try and do some events together, but we're always trying to have fun, have a good time. So follow them. Follow Eli and Spiro too. So that's on YouTube, and then I have a separate YouTube for all the sketches and stuff, and that can be found at Jefe Pil. So it's JEFEPIL, and I am El Jefe on Twitter. And we're pretty active. We like to have people on our show, so like we let fans get their voice heard and join the show. We'll open up the phone lines, and it always seems to be a good time. And we're for the people, and we enjoy having a seat at the table, and we don't take it lightly. We appreciate all the support from people, so thank you.
I like to call myself or consider myself the people's beat writer. So you guys will be the people's show, and we'll get together and do a crossover. Hopefully before the season, we can get the other guys on and find the right time to do it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I love all the stuff you guys do. I've loved, getting to know you guys, and I appreciate you coming on and talking training camp. Wednesday morning, gates open at 8:30, and then practice will start around 10 o'clock. Over weather permitting, so make sure you follow along on social media. We'll let you know, because if there's lightning involved, then they have to go inside, and then fans are not allowed in, because who wants that kind of liability? And
they will practice in the rain, though. They won't move it inside just for rain.
It depends on what's going on and what's predicted for the weather that day. So
because it's day one, you don't want anybody slipping on day one. So
yeah, and Giants fans will clearly expect that if that's
Oh yeah, that's happening. Yeah, right. But if it's open, I'll be there.
Cool, and I will be there too. So I will see you then. Thanks for joining me. For Jefe, for our producer Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. We will be back with a show once camp gets rolling, and make sure you follow all my coverage on NorthJersey.com. We appreciate you, as always, being all in, and we'll stay all in with the New York Giants as well. Thanks for watching today, and we will catch you soon. Enjoy training camp, and we'll be back soon for another edition of All In.